you guys said. Bad evening, everybody. My name is Abe Bonowitz. I'm the Executive Director of Death Penalty Action. What we've just seen is an injustice and a human rights violation. The execution of a person is always a human rights violation, no matter how it's done. But this experimentation, which we're about to hear about from witnesses who saw it, is just unnecessary. For me, the most outrageous part of all of this is that not only the torture that was done to Kenny Smith in November of 2022, sending him back to his cell after a failed execution attempt. That wasn't enough. Asking him then to live through these next weeks about just imagining every possible scenario. You know, this is not who we are as a country. It's not who we are as a state. It's not something that should be done, and yet it was done. Death penalty action doesn't take a position on how we kill our prisoners. We oppose the death penalty in all cases because it is a violation of human rights and because the system is irreparably broken. And this case tonight is the prime example of that. We executed a man tonight who, if he was on trial today, would not have gotten a death sentence because his jury was not unanimous, and Alabama outlawed jury override in 2017. We know that we can be safe from people who've done terrible crimes and hold them accountable without executions, because that's what we do in the vast majority of cases. We throw away the key. It's not life without parole, it's death in prison. And that's what the vast majority of murderers get. With me here is Gary Drinker, who spent time on death row with Kenny. He was exonerated and freed when his innocence was proven, and he'll have some remarks. Also, Lee Hedgepeth with Tread News, and of course, Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood, who is on the advisory committee of Death Penalty Action, and it has been an honor and a privilege to be able to work closely with Jeff for a number of years now. This is the 5th execution he's been in the death chamber for in the past 13 months. Jeff shows up for the people in the deepest, darkest holes in our country, and he did that again tonight. So, Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood.
Sorry, sir. Can we just move our microphones? We were expecting them to be in the center. More.
Sure. Well, Jeff is going to speak now.
Yeah, I mean, there are other people here who witnessed this tonight, not just me. And I see reporters here that I know witnessed this. I think that anybody that witnessed this knows that we didn't see someone go unconscious in 2 or 3 seconds. We didn't see somebody go unconscious in 30 seconds. What we saw was minutes of someone struggling for their life. We saw minutes of someone heaving back and forth. We saw spit. We saw all sorts of stuff from his mouth develop on the mask. We saw this mask tied to the gurney and him ripping his head forward over and over and over again. And we also saw correction officials in the room who were visibly surprised at how bad this thing went. I know that Commissioner Ham, I know that ADOC is going to come out here and say, well, this is what we thought was going to happen. Look at their court filings. This is not what they thought was going to happen. Kenny Smith was by no means a perfect person. Kenny Smith committed a horrible crime. And I think it is absolutely disgusting that the state of Alabama has allowed this moment to overshadow the memory of Elizabeth Sennett. Make no mistake, this is not about not remembering Elizabeth Sennett. This is about remembering Elizabeth Sennett appropriately and not with a torturous execution. I mean, I feel so sorry for the Sennett family tonight. That this is how the state decided they were going to honor Elizabeth Sennett's memory. For me, you know, my time with Kenny was wonderful at the end. Kenny had a very sweet side to him. I was able to go into the execution chamber and anoint his head with oil. We consistently repeated this mantra that we have repeated the whole time: love and life, trying to fill every second with love and life. I hope that that's a message that people can understand. Regardless of the situation, we need to spend our time filling our lives with love and life. You know, I think it's also important to mention that Kenny, at the very end, when I came in and saw him, I think it's important, I'm sure that this has been described already, but the mask itself looked like a firefighter's mask. It had straps coming from it to go to the back of the gurney. So there's 2 straps here. It was about as tight as it could possibly be. And even when he was hooked up to that whole contraption, he still was telling me, we got this, Jeff. We got this. I mean, this is somebody who's about to be executed. And he saw that I was really struggling. And he kept saying, we got this. I'll be perfectly frank. I feel tremendous guilt for having been in that room tonight. Tremendous guilt. Because I stood there and cried while I saw someone get suffocated to death. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is, even in that moment for myself. But what I do know is that a great evil was unleashed on the state of Alabama tonight. And we have got to do whatever it takes to make sure that this never, ever happens again. Lastly, I want to say that we've been lied to by Governor Ivey. We've been lied to by Attorney General Marshall. We've been lied to by Commissioner Ham. Over and over again, we were said that this was going to be the most humane execution that humanity has ever experienced. There is no doubt that even the most hopeful of persons could not look at what we saw tonight and see any sort of humaneness. Again, we have been lied to. And I hope that in a state that spends all this time talking about how it wants small government, I hope that this is a moment in which the people of Alabama say, not in my name. We are going to hold government accountable. We're going to reject this big government of suffocation. And we're going to say no to evil. No to evil.
My name is Lee Hedgepeth. I'm a reporter for Trid News. I'm here to just give a brief account of what I witnessed tonight. So the execution began around 7:53. As Reverend Hood mentioned, Kenny was strapped down to the gurney. The upper part of his body was strapped to the gurney. He was wrapped in a white sheet from about his neck down to his feet. The mask was secured tightly to his head and appears to be tied in some way to the gurney. Once the execution began, within a couple of minutes, Kenny began to violently push against the straps. His head began to move back and forth violently. This was the 5th execution that I've witnessed in Alabama, and I have never seen such a violent reaction to an execution. After a few minutes, Kenny began heaving inside the mask. One of the concerns that a lot of experts had was related to vomiting inside of the mask, and we saw Kenny heaving. After a few minutes, Kenny continued to gasp for breath, and those breaths, the effort to get breath slowed over time, and the execution concluded at about 8:15. After Gary speaks, I'm happy to answer any questions about
22 minutes.
the execution.
Everybody needs to hear that. 22 minutes. We were told 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 22 minutes.
Governor Ivy, with all of her intelligence, all of her dignity, has lost her dignity. She was a well thought of lady. She was going out of politics. She had nothing to lose. Why not show a slightest bit of compassion for a man that has already went through an execution and say, why not show the slightest bit of compassion? Why take another life when clemency is there? There's no way that man could have ever harmed anybody else. He wouldn't have harmed anybody if he could have. Kenny Smith was a changed man. Kenny Smith was a born-again Christian. Kenny Smith was my brother. I mean, I loved him like a brother. And to see this, to hear this happen, I'm glad I couldn't have seen it. I couldn't have said it. But to hear that this happened, it breaks my heart. It absolutely breaks my heart that a governor of her integrity, of her knowledge, could allow something like this to go on. I mean, who controls Governor Ivy? Is it Steve Marshall? Is it some other politician? I mean, why did they make her do this? Someone made Governor Ivy go through this mess.
Gary, do you want to introduce yourself just a little bit more? How long you're on death row and when?
My name is Gary Drinkard. I was a death row exoneree from Alabama. I was locked up for almost 8 years, on death row for almost 6. When I got there, I met Kenny Smith. Good man then. I mean, he offered to loan me coffee when I didn't have none. He offered to loan me tobacco when I didn't have none. He offered to help me any way he could until I could get commissary. Kenny Smith was always a good friend to anyone that would allow him to be their friend. He wasn't a bad man. He was a changed man.
Thank you. Questions? Any questions?
Reverend Hood, do you have Mr. Smith's final statement?
I don't have it verbatim. I could give just a slight rendering of it. Basically, Kenny wanted people to know that he felt a lot of humanity after the botched execution because people were concerned about him, and they were sort of, I guess, felt like that was horrible. What happened to him was horrible, and he felt like that all of that was kind of dashed with this nitrogen epoxy execution. That's not the exact wording, but that's the gist of what he said.
Quick question, Reverend. There, on the list that we received from ADOC, we had that 2 sons were going to witness. Did one choose not to, or what was the deal there?
So I think that I can't speak to that directly, but I do know that when I encountered them before the execution, there was only one son.
Okay.
And I also know that one son's wife was there this afternoon.
But that was Kenny's wife who was in the
No.
witness.
This was Kenny's daughter-in-law.
Okay, it's
the
his son and
son's-
daughter-in-law.
Right. Sorry.
Lee,
Uh,
and then was the other gentleman an attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's worth noting that Kenny didn't get his full complement of witnesses. Liz Brunick was banned from witnessing the execution.
Yeah, I think that's just side piece of this. Liz, writer for The Atlantic, who's kind of chronicled, this moment, this horrible moment in Alabama history. We were in the waiting area, and normally, we experience this. I usually am able to bring in a pen to write various things. Most of the time, it's got to do with what the guy wants in terms of his last moments or other sorts of spiritual things, prayers, whatnot. There are other people who come and they write all sorts of things. Warden Rayvon decided that he didn't want ends in there, and so he came and demanded not just people's pens, but also their notes. And anybody who is, all of y'all are reporters, you know how valuable your notes are. She had been taking notes the whole day as the conversation she was having with me. They took her to an area that was outside of our view. And basically, they got her unclothed enough to get the notes. They took notes, and the last time I saw them, they were in the trash can. And so this was a moment that I believe is a serious violation of a free press in our country. I think that if somebody has the time to spend with someone who's about to be executed, they should have that ability, and they shouldn't face something like this from the Alabama Department of Corrections. But again, that speaks to, Lee had a similar terrible experience, not the exact same. They gave him a pen and a pad, and then they decided they didn't want to give him a pen and a pad, and they took that away. So there was all of this sort of just lunacy around how this was going to be reported and how this was going to be documented. And, I think that we saw over and over again in our time visiting that they were very scared that what happened is going to get out. And what happened tonight is going to get out. And they can't take enough pens away or enough pads away to hide what happened tonight.
You're going to have to illuminate us a little bit, Father. Protocol was redacted. I saw parts of it to help illuminate the situation, but you're going to have to fill in some of what you can fill in, because most of this is redacted. So what did you see?
First of all, Ralph and others, I'm thankful that you were there. I think we're so thankful for y'all, because if y'all weren't there, then it would be my word, and they would say, "Oh, that's just that crazy activist preacher guy." But again, this free press, we are so thankful for that. The other thing I was going to say, as far as the protocol is concerned, at Casey McWhorter's, I guess that's important to mention. I was in the last execution that Alabama had, which was Casey McWhorter's execution in November. I was his spiritual advisor as well. So what we saw was at Casey McWhorter's execution, there were certain places that I knew I would be at certain times. Those places were not the same this time. In fact, there was one moment where the corrections officer walked me outside, and it was raining, and she had to get an umbrella. I've never been walked outside before. That was very bizarre. In fact, I thought that I was being escorted. I thought like something had happened and I was getting kicked out, or something shady was happening. Another thing that was different is that I got to spend. Let me take this. This will help in terms of sequence. So Kenny is taken back to the waiting chamber, which is right outside of the execution chamber. I was left in the visiting area, and I was left there for probably maybe an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes. Obviously, an incredibly nerve-wracking time when you're sitting there by yourself. Another thing a quick thing I'll mention, from the visiting area in Holman, you can see into the office of Holman. Like there's a slit here, you probably know what I'm talking about. You can sit in that viewing area and you can see in there. So I could see members of the Attorney General's staff in there, and I'm just looking, kind of seeing what's going on. Next thing I know, they've got paper taped over the window, so I can't see them anymore. Again, you're sitting in there by yourself and you're beginning to think, well, what is all of these secrets? What is about to happen? But anyway, so Kenny went back. I was eventually taken to Kenny in the waiting cell. And this is about to sound insane, but do y'all remember the sitcom Wings? Like in the 90s, early 90s, 80s? Anyways, they were blasting Wings. All the corrections officers were blasting, I believe it's called Wings, but this sitcom, while I was sitting there talking to Kenny, his final moments, reading scripture, he's making final phone calls, and all the corrections officers are sitting there watching the sitcom, and they're sitting there having drinks, there's some food there. So we keep going, and I'm taken back, and then I was taken to a room where, like a trailer, where Robert Grass, Kenny's wife Dee, his son, and Lee was there. And from there, I was, when I came in the room, I was really surprised to see these guys because that's never happened before. I've never been taken and shuttled around like that before. But anyways, I went back in, and I come to the door of the execution chamber, and the guard next to me, she kept on saying, they're having trouble getting the mask on. And I said, why is this taking, what's going on? Why are we not moving? They're having trouble getting the mask on. I don't know what that means. I wasn't there to see it, but I do know that's what was said. I come in, and I go into the chamber. It was, best way of saying it was shocking to see Kenny in that mask. I didn't really know what to expect, but when I saw the mask, it was like, whoa. All of this is parts of the protocol that were followed and not followed along the way, or at least described differently. We go in, before they had told me that I could only talk at the beginning of going in. Well, he begins to talk to me the whole time, and I begin to talk to him the whole time, and we just keep talking. And I don't really know when I'm supposed to not talk. In fact, I just talked through the whole thing, until the curtains were open. Miss Stewart Riley, the woman that's in charge of men's corrections, I believe for the state, she was in the chamber, and the question of who's in the chamber was a little strange in that I was told there would be one corrections officer in the chamber, and there were multiple corrections officers in the chamber. I'll also say that, backing up just a little bit, when I first came in to sort of anoint his head with oil, I mean, there were possibly 15 corrections officers in this. I mean, this room, the room is no bigger than, I mean, you know, from here to there, it's smaller than that. And it was felt like they were all standing there, like almost excited or at attention that this is about to take place. Going back to where I was, we're sitting there and the execution starts. And I guess from there, the bottom line is, I mean, protocol kind of went out the window. I mean, because, you know, what they told us in the protocol was going to happen. We're going to check this. We're going to do this. We're going to get a flat line. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. A doctor will pronounce his passing. None of that happened.
Was there a doctor in there?
So this is a very interesting question. Thank you, Gary. There was a doctor in there, and when I saw the doctor, there wasn't a doctor in the room, but there was a doctor there when I left the room, and he was like almost cussing out the other corrections officers for having been revealed. And I think it is absolutely important for people to understand and to know that someone who has taken the Hippocratic oath, an oath to do no harm, as I can't speak to who this doctor is. I think even if I knew, I probably wouldn't. But it is to say that the state is finding all sorts of people to participate in these situations, and they're keeping them secret. We don't know anything about their qualifications. We don't know anything. I'll also say something that just came to mind, along with the oxygen monitors. I was very interested in the oxygen monitors. I wanted to know who these oxygen monitors, who was looking at them,
Right.
the numbers, and all of that kind of stuff. So from what I understand, a 22 on an oxygen monitor, the air is about 78% nitrogen, from what I understand. So a 22 is normal. So anything above a 22 means that oxygen is being, in my understanding, means that oxygen is being forced into the room. When I looked at the oxygen monitor before we went into the chamber, we were at a 26, which caused me to really be concerned about what type of air we were breathing. I don't know what all of that means. I can tell you I felt lightheaded. That might have been because of what I saw, but there were a number of little things like that. I'll also say that I think this is very important for everybody to hear. When I did the orientation, 2 days ago, I guess, yesterday, sorry, it's getting packed. But Ralph, when I did the orientation, they told me, contrary to the protocol, they said that if the oxygen monitors go off, they were not going to evacuate the chamber. They're not going to evacuate inside the chamber. They were not planning on evacuating the witnesses. That was a call that gets to be made by the captain inside the chamber of who is going to be evacuated. The lunacy of that, of course, is the door is locked. The door to the execution chamber is locked from the inside. So if something would have happened and the captain would have collapsed or whatever, that's the person who was supposed to get us out of the room. I mean, so I guess what I'm just saying, Ralph, is that there were a lot of things that felt very willy-nilly, a lot of cutting of the protocol, but that's the thing. If you are able to redact the protocol that much, you get to make up your own rules.
Do you have to see anything with the system itself?
Yeah, I think that, I want to make sure everybody hears this. The oxygen monitors were manufactured by a company called CO2monitors.com, which anything that I've ever encountered that has .com in the name is a little, I feel a little suspect sometimes. But CO2monitors.com. And I saw that yesterday at the orientation, and then when I came in today, all of that was covered up with tape. So obviously they don't want people to know that. But CO2monitors.com. I hope that our activist friends out there get a hold of that information.
Any other questions?
Was the mask so tight over his face, it was just blenching his face?
I mean, it was just, I mean, y'all, the mask was so tight that every time he thrust forward, you just saw it over and over and over and over. I mean, and we saw it for, as Lee said, 22 minutes. I mean, at least 15 minutes of those, he was struggling. I have never, I mean, this is the 5th execution I've seen in 13 months. I've never seen anything like this. I think that lethal injection is preferable every single day compared to this. What we saw tonight is torture. I mean, I think that a fair judicial system, a fair federal court system will look at this and say, this is absolutely 100% cruel and unusual punishment. And I'm very sad that they didn't make that decision before we had to witness the horror tonight.
Just wanted to confirm one thing. Were there 15 people in the chamber as?
So as I was anointing him with oil, when I was coming from for the first time in, which was before they put the mask on Kenny, there were 15 people in the room sort of standing around. I also, really quick, y'all want to say anything? Dee, do you want to say anything? You want to say something? Yeah, CO2 monitor. Maybe it's me. You got me question. I want to briefly introduce, this is Kenny's wife, Dee.
Can you turn my microphone, please? The blue one. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt where you guys were at in first of all, on behalf of our family, and Kenny as well, we want to thank everybody for the outpour of support and love and prayers that we have received. Not just from here locally, or in the country even, but across the world. We have had some amazing people reach out and just share love, kindness, and mercy. And the hardest thing about all of this is, Kenny, over the last month, since December 20th, when we had court, we went to court and they said that this was all speculative. It could happen. And, the vomiting, was really the big issue because he suffered from PTSD and that happened to him last year. He was strapped down and driving for 4 hours, and they made it sound like he resisted, but he didn't. He came back from that changed. He got PTSD, anxiety, depression, and those doctors at Pullman Correctional Facility knew that. They prescribed him medications. They prescribed him medication for that. And our own expert in court on the plaintiff said that some of the response from PTSD is vomiting, and they said because at that point in time he had not started vomiting, that it wasn't going to happen. It was only speculative. About the first of the around January 1st, you know, all that anxiety started picking up. It's the first of the year. While everybody's sitting there waiting for Christmas and all excited about Christmas, our family was waiting for the courts to decide the fate of my husband and whether he was going to suffer or were we going to stand up and do the right thing. We say we're a country that believes in the Constitution. And I'm sorry, but I just don't see that. Tonight I watched my husband jerk and convulge. And gasp for air for at least 10 minutes. I can't say for the correct time as I was not looking at the clock, you know, when they started. And the other thing I want to say is the fact that, you know, they put the media in that room with us, my family. And while our son was crying, I was having to watch his father take his last gasp for air. The media is sitting behind us, shuffling papers and talking about time. My question to you guys is, where's the humanity? Where's the compassion? Where's love and forgiveness?
That's great. They lose it. They lose it some point down the line. They lose it. Thank you for coming up here.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say before we wrap it up that, you know, I don't want to, like, you know, call anyone out or nothing like that, but I do want the Sennett family to know that they are loved, that just because we were fiercely opposed to this execution does not mean that we do not feel unbelievable grief at what they have experienced. And I also want to say that this is a horrible situation. This is a no-win situation for everybody. And I hope that we can get to a point as humans where we stop killing each other. I think that's it. Does anybody else have anything? Thank you all very much.